Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. I'm so glad you're here. And today what I want to do is dupe a piece of furniture from the White Lotus Season 3. This season is gorgeous. What I'm showing you here are pictures of the resort where a lot of it is filmed. And there's a particular piece of furniture that I really like that I wanted to dupe. And all I have is these terrible pictures I took of my TV screen, but it's a chest of drawers. And if you've seen this show, you know the significance of this chest of drawers. I just loved the way that it looked. So what I'm going to do is remake this little cabinet that I have under my desk. You can see a little bit of a mess here. And this is actually, although it's sort of flat pack furniture, it's actually surprisingly heavy and substantial. So you can see that it's got a little door which just opens, and what I'm going to do is make this over to look like the drawers in the piece of furniture in the White Lotus. And what I'm going to do first is just take that door off of the front, and I'm going to work on the door first. So I'm going to remove the knob. It's actually a really nice knob, so I know I'll find another place for that. And then you can see that this has a sort of plastic insert. It's corrugated, and it's between layers of the door. So I'm just going to leave that. And what I'm going to do is try to find some pieces of wood that I just have lying around that I can use to fill that in. So my goal is to find something that is the same size or depth as the pieces of wood around it so that I have a nice flat front. And I've actually found two things that are the correct depth. One is those paint stirrers, the really big ones. They come 3 to a package at Home Depot, but I don't have any packages of those. So even though they're the right size, all I have are a few leftover pieces. And then I've got these shelves from the Dollar Tree. They're called wall shelf, and it's 2 basically hanging shelves. And these are actually exactly the right size. So what I'm going to do is put one in there, and then I'll cut the other one to fill in the space underneath the one that I put in. And I'm just going to measure that and then cut it with my Stanley saw, which comes with my Stanley miter box and saw. But to saw that, I just held it over the edge of my table and sawed it. And I was trying to make it really tight, so I sanded it until they fit in there perfectly, but I do not think that it was necessary to make it quite so tight. And then the piece that's left over is really no good. It's too thin to fit in that area that's left. Fortunately, I have 2 sets of these hanging shelves, so I just took another shelf out, and I was able to cut a couple of pieces off of that to fit in that area that's open on the side there. Now to glue that all together, I'm going to use wood glue on the edges of the wood. And I'm going to use clear Gorilla Glue to glue the wood down to the corrugated plastic. I think that's going to work. I believe Gorilla Glue expands. So with clear Gorilla Glue, you spray water on one surface. So I'm going to spritz some water on the plastic and then put the glue on the pieces of wood. And again, put wood glue on the edges and then fit them all in as best I can. I have one piece that isn't a very tight fit, so I'm going to glue that to the edges of the door and leave the gap between that piece and the other pieces of wood. And then I just put a bunch of heavy books on top of that. I probably should have tried to clamp it because once it dried, it wasn't completely flat. And that's also probably because I tried to make it such a tight fit. I should have left a little bit more space between the pieces of wood. So once that had all dried, I have the hole in the door where the knob was, and then I have smaller holes in the hanging shelves where they're supposed to hang. So I took a dowel and wrapped it in some brown paper, used wood glue to glue the paper to the dowel, and then I stuck that in the hole where the handle was, and that's just because I didn't have a dowel that was big enough to fit in there. And then I used toothpicks and wood glue in the little holes that were in the shelves. And then I used spackle and filled in the rest of what was there for the holes and the spaces between the shelves and the door. And now you can see how that's not completely flat. So I did take that down to the basement and use my mouse sander to try to sand that as flat as I could. I also just sanded over all of the edges because I'm going to be painting this door. Here it is sanded, and I'm just going to clean that dust off of it with a damp towel. Now, I don't know about this next step. I thought it would be a good idea. You can do this or not, if you're making over a similar piece. So what I have here is the inside of a roll of wrapping paper. Sometimes there's a cardboard tube, but sometimes there's a sort of heavy brown paper that's rolled up. So it's like very thin cardboard. So what I'm going to do is iron that to make it flat. And I'm going to trace around my door and cut this out so that it's basically the size of my door. And I'm going to glue that down to the door with wood glue. Now, the reason that this was a little problematic is because it didn't glue down super flat, and every time I painted it, it would start to bubble up again. So I ironed it several times throughout this process. After I glued it down and it dried, I then ironed it to try to get it flat, and it did work pretty well. Now, the reason I wanted it was for when I cut sort of channels in this to be the separations around the drawers so that these will look like drawers. I wasn't sure how easy it would be to cut into the door and the wood, and so I thought at a minimum I would at least be able to cut into this thin cardboard. It also gives me a nice plain surface to work on, so it's not distracting with all those pieces, but you may not wish to do a step like this on your piece. Now, one of the reasons that I picked this piece of furniture to make over is because it is a square, and in the piece in the White Lotus, all of the drawers are squares. So I thought with a nice square piece, I can put 4 drawers in it, all of them a square. If it's not a square, of course, you can still figure out what size your drawers are going to be, but I figured with the size of this, 4 drawers would be appropriate, and it would be easy to calculate, and it would look good. So that's part of the reason I chose this. So this door will be 4 drawers and the separating pieces between the drawers. And then the outside of the box, the actual piece of furniture, will be the outside of those 4 drawers. So I measured the edge of that, and that is 5/8 of an inch. And the door itself is 13 inches. So each drawer will be 6 3/16 of an inch square. So I tried drawing those on while this is drying, but I really need to trim it first because there is a little bit of an overlap. So I'm going to wait for it to dry, and then it'll be nice and stiff with the glue, and then just trim around it. And then I will re-measure where those lines for the pieces between the drawers will go. Now, I'm also going to find the center of each of those squares because I'm going to put a drawer pull in the center of each of them. Now, I have ordered some from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description to the ones that I ordered. But I should not have put them right in the center because really it's like a little circle with a circular pull under it. Really, it's the center of that should be centered, not the center of the top of that. And so fortunately, I think I haven't gotten the drawer pulls yet from Amazon as I'm doing this. So I just drilled a small hole in each of those spots, the center of each drawer, faux drawer, so I would know where they were going to go after I paint it. And fortunately, they're small because I'm going to have to drill new holes, which are a little bit above these. I was planning to drill new holes the correct size. Anyway, I was going to drill them right through these holes, but now I'm going to have to drill over them. So I should have waited until I got them and figured it out. But anyway, it worked out just fine because they're not that much higher. So the drawer pull itself is going to cover up these little holes. Now the next step is to cut out around each of the faux drawers. And you can see I totally forgot I was going to do this and started to paint black along the lines. So if you don't want to cut, you can just paint black and it will probably look pretty good. I really did want to have actual channels. So I'm just going to use my box cutter knife, and I want to cut around the drawers, and I'm going to make 2 cuts just a little distance apart from each other and then just try to dig out the wood between them. So after I do that for all 4 of the drawers, then I'm going to paint inside that channel with black. And I'm using chalk paint for this entire project. So this is Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint in rich black. So I'm painting that in the channels and then just around the edges of each drawer. I'm going to be painting over this, but I wanted to make sure I got down into those channels, and then I'm going to be repainting this again. Now the base color for this piece is Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint in Grotto. It's a very greenish teal color. I'm going to paint this in all of the faux drawers and between the faux drawers. I will end up painting over some of the black. My goal here is to make sure there isn't any location that isn't painted. So even if I paint over some of the black, that's fine. I'm going to go back in and paint the black again anyway. And now it did come up a little bit or bubble up. In some places it just flattened itself right out again. But I did iron over it. I just put some parchment over it and ironed it. I think the paint wasn't dry enough. A little bit came up. I repainted it. And then I also painted the edges of the door. I'm not painting the inside of this cabinet or the back of the door. The back of the door does not look good because it's got that plastic insert. You can still see it. But I'm going to paint the edges, of course. Now the actual piece is a little bit bluer than this color. Of course, I could make this piece whatever color I wanted. You can make your piece whatever color you want, but I thought I would like this to be a little more blue. So I'm going to take Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint in Cascade and just put a light wash of that over this. And then that is a little bit more blue than I want, so then I'm going to come back in with the grotto and go over that again. Now I'm not going to paint the black yet because the whole piece is sort of dinged up with black, so I thought I would paint those gold circles that are in the center of each drawer first. And I started by making circles that were the same proportion as the ones on the White Lotus piece, but I do think that those drawers are much smaller, so I didn't like those proportions here, so you'll see later I'm going to make them smaller. But for now I took my compass and I drew circles using the hole that I had drilled as the center of my circle, and I just drew some circles with my compass. And then I had taken a piece of paper and painted the grotto on a piece of paper and then put a lot of my different gold paints on that to find the one that I liked the best. The one in White Lotus is a sort of reddish gold, I think. And so this is the only place I'm not using chalk paint. The main color is going to be Deco Art Dazzling Metallics in Rich Espresso. And then over that, I'm going to dab Folk Art Multi-Surface Metallic in bronze. So I am going to use a stenciling brush and pounce these circles onto the piece, let the Rich Espresso dry, and then pounce the bronze over that. And then I came in with the black and redid my lines around all of the drawers and tried to make them messy as they are in the piece in White Lotus. And I also put some dabs of black over the piece. I'm really not happy with this. The piece in White Lotus has blotches of black all over it, but I was not able to recreate that look in a way that made me happy, so I aged this in a different way. So here's what I did. First, I made those circles much smaller. So I took the grotto and I went around the edge of the circle with the stenciling brush, and then I went on the inside of that with the stenciling brush, but lighter, so giving a sort of a feathered look. And again, made those much smaller. And then I took Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint in Rich Espresso, which is a dark brown color, used my stenciling brush, and just pounced that over all of the black and grotto parts of the front of the cabinet. I then sprayed that with a satin varnish spray. And my drawer pulls came in from Amazon, and I drilled a hole the appropriate size for the hardware for these, a centimeter above my original holes. So the top of the drawer pull will cover the original hole. The screws that came with these are far too long, and what I ended up doing was using some very heavy-duty bolt cutters to cut the screws down, and then I was able to attach all of the drawer pulls to the front. So that's the door finished. So for the cabinet itself, the process is very similar. I first sanded the whole thing all over, and there were a couple of places where it had those little plastic things that go over a screw hole. You find them in flat pack furniture, so I took those out and filled the holes with spackle. And then this time I painted the whole thing with grotto, but I took some of the cascade and dragged it through while the grotto was wet, instead of painting with grotto, waiting for it to dry, and then washing with cascade and then grotto. I have somehow lost the footage of that. I'm very sorry. What I have here is footage of me doing the same technique on the turtle table I made 2 summers ago, although I'm sure you get the idea. So I did that for the entire piece, plus, of course, the front, and a little bit on the inside because I thought you might be able to see the inside just a little bit near the front, even with the door closed. So then what I did was I took the burnt umber and I pounced that over the entire piece with a brush and brushed it in some places and dry brushed it along the edges. And then because there is black on the door, I did the same thing with black, but only a very little bit of black on the outside. And then a coat of spray varnish over that entire piece. And I will probably do another coat, but it is raining right now, so I can't do it right now. But I do want to protect that paint. And then I just reattached the door to the front, just a couple of screws to put that on. And now I have my piece. Okay, I thought I had my piece. I thought I was done. And then I watched the final episode of the show and I got a glimpse of the piece from the side. And I could see that it had gold painting on the side. So I used the same 2 gold colors that I used on the front, and I dabbed a pattern on the sides, on the edges, that looked to me like the piece in the White Lotus. So a few of these images are going to be of just the sides so you can see what I did there. I would love to know what you think. Please tell me in the comments. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.